Welcome to the Self Within podcast, where we will look to ancient traditions and modern insights to seek guidance, knowledge, and practical tools to help us reconnect with our true selves. Join me, your host, as we explore various topics from mindfulness and meditation to energy healing, astrology, and much more. We'll hear from experts and everyday individuals to explore the connections that exist between mind, body, and spirit, and how we can use them for personal growth. Today, we're going to be talking about cacao. Now, cacao is so much more than what we find at the store. It's a plant, a tree, a fruit, and a healing medicine with a lineage that stretches back thousands of years. It holds a rich history in native Mesoamerican cultures where it was used as a sacred drink to connect with the divine. It was used for ceremonies and rituals, and even as a currency. Today, cacao is still being embraced as a plant medicine, and its role in ceremonies is only growing as cacao circles become more and more popular. So, let's dive in and get to know Mama Cacao, her healing properties, and how to work with this sacred medicine. Joining me today is Nele Zeeh, cacao ceremony facilitator and teacher from World of Cacao, and Rudy Pila, founder of Community Cacao. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you so much.
I'm really excited to talk about this topic because it feels like only a year ago, I really became introduced to cacao. I started to explore it for myself. And it's been a journey, as I'm sure it has been for you as well. So, really curious to learn more from both of your perspectives and also how you're working with it. But before we get into that, my first question is why cacao? When we think of cacao, I'm going to generalize, but I think for many people, cacao is a powder that we add to our smoothies. We make it into a nice warm drink. Maybe we sprinkle some marshmallows on it. We add it to our baked goods and we have a really delicious dessert that we make with it. But what we're talking about today is really this minimally processed cacao, ceremonial grade, which ancient civilizations from the Aztecs, the Maya have used to connect with source, from my understanding, and also for healing. So, based on your studies and also what you know, what is it about this plant that really led indigenous cultures to use it in this way?
From my understanding, it was used a lot. It wasn't really just for healing, it was really for celebration. It was used for so many different ceremonies. One of the stories that jumps out for me that I really connected with was how it was used for conflict resolution, and not in the ways that we would think of in this time now, right? Because when we think war, it's two people going against each other in physical time space reality. But how it was used, from my understanding and my research, is that these tribes would sit within their tribe, drink cacao in their cave, and the other tribe would do it in their cave and solve it on a higher energetic level. And this is how they would work with the energy and the spirit of Mama Cacao.
Wow. So they're not even connecting physically, they're connecting spiritually
From
or,
my
or
understanding, yeah.
energetically, I would say.
Yeah. And we can also do this kind of practice as well, too, because sometimes the physical being, not like it gets in the way, but sometimes it's harder to communicate with the denser reality. And it's easier sometimes to talk to somebody, a conflict or something, on a higher level of resolving it in that way. So that way it feels more peaceful in your body. And the reflection will eventually catch up to the third dimension.
Wow. Okay. I never even thought about using cacao that way, but that makes total sense to me, at least from my own workings with energy and how I understand that it works. I have to give that a try. I'm going to have to give that a try because that sounds so interesting to me. So, Neela, what about you? What are your perspectives or thoughts on this one?
I think it adds on to what you already said. For me, what I learned is that it's a way to connect to God, to the divine, to that higher consciousness, and also it increases our consciousness. So It brings us out of that busy monkey mind into that higher perspective, that ego perspective that can tap back into love and can tap back into all above these stories that we sometimes tell each other. So for me, it's a powerful way to get out of my head and more into my body, and also feel my heart more, and also connect with the world around me. Like I feel and sense everything more in that way. So yeah, I become more present, more focused, and that's also what I experience in the cacao ceremonies that I do with the people.
I know there are so many other types of plant medicines out there. People know about ayahuasca and other healing medicines that, from my understanding, go a lot deeper. And I think with cacao, it's a lot gentler. Would you
Mm-hmm.
say that's the case?
For sure. I've learned that like cacao is the only one that you don't trip on from the plant medicines. It's more gentle, and I also like to say that it takes you as far as you're ready to go. You can go very deep with cacao if you're ready for it.
Mm.
Like if you really sit in ceremony and have a strong intention. If I drink a cacao and don't really set an intention, it's just a drink basically, but really honoring it and put the whole ceremony spirit in it really makes a difference in my opinion. And then also opening up for the medicine to work for you.
Well, it's interesting that you say the intention piece because when I first started working with cacao, I was doing it daily and I thought, okay, I'm going to try to integrate this into my routine. I'm going to try to pair it with a meditation, with a gratitude practice. So I was very good at it for a couple of weeks where I was doing it regularly. And actually, this is something I remember from attending that first session with you, Rudy, when I met you about a year ago, where as you were telling us your story, there was something that you said, which is cacao really changed my life, or it really changed you in a very deep and powerful way. And I remember thinking, ooh, I want it to change me. Right. I was like, how is it going to change me? And so I did this regular practice. And I feel like my intention was off because although I did it with gratitude and the meditation piece, it was like my intention was really about waiting for something to happen, waiting for the miracle, waiting for an answer. I don't even know what it was. And so the daily practice stopped and it evolved to much more sporadic. And then I revisited again, probably around the time when I met you, Nele, when we were doing that healing circle around healing the father wound. And then I started to get into a much deeper topic, something that was much more in my subconscious. And eventually I started to learn that I needed to be more strategic with how I use my cacao versus every single day, and actually use it at times when I really was working on something, either a negative pattern or just something that was showing up for me in my present moment. And then the cacao would come in and either open me up and make me release stuck emotion, or just help point something out, make me more aware about something that maybe I wasn't so aware of before. So I just want to circle back to the intention piece because I really think that it matters. And there was a cacao ceremony that I had recently where someone had asked me, should I do this regularly? And I would love to hear from you. What's your take on that?
I feel like a lot of it is different for everybody because we're all so different and what our needs are. My teacher would always tell me that cacao brings us to the door. She never pushes us through. She kind of holds our hand throughout the whole process. So sometimes, like for me, I don't drink cacao every day, but I more so do than I don't. And sometimes the intention is just to be present with my sweetheart as we go and move throughout our day. Maybe that is the intention. Maybe it doesn't have to be so, oh, I'm going to handle my shadows and I'm going to work through this. Like sometimes the medicine is just to be present and to be open to receive whatever the universe has in store for me and open my heart up just a little bit more. I think in some ways it really is about developing a relationship with the plant spirit because it's just fix me, change me, do me. It's like how can we have this symbiotic relationship where it's like, hi, nice to meet you. I would like to get to know you. Would you like to get to know me? Can we have this dance together? And we start to develop this conversation and it grows over time and the spirit really gets to know you. And it gets to know us in a way that's so beautiful because cacao isn't like any other medicine. Some medicines, like there's a fine line between drug and a medicine, right? But some things it's like you need more, and people are like, oh, I need more of this. But it's not the case with Mama Cacao. You can literally not drink a cup at all, but you can still connect to the energy. You can still connect with her spirit. And it's not something you need more of. It's actually something you start to drink less of and be like, oh, okay, that's it. The rest is going to Mother Earth because my body is saying this is good. When we're listening, we can really feel that, oh, this is all I needed today.
I love that. Oftentimes, we also struggle with being aware of our body and our needs and our intuition, and the fact that we can even use cacao for that. Just learning how to listen in terms of, okay, it's time to stop. This is all you need right now, or don't drink me for a couple of weeks, or whatever it is, right? You're starting to really just become more attuned to those really subtle messages or energies.
I've made the same experience. For me, it's also like less is more. And like the years I've taken it, it's been less and less. And usually I really feel like it should be kept this medicine. So like I've had cacaos where I didn't put an intention in, and then of course it changes something in the way how I go through the day, but I feel like it is much more powerful when we really take the time and honor it in a sacred way. And with the kind of connecting with the spirit, I sometimes call it a lazy cacao. And that's just like 100% cacao powder with water. So the same as in the ceremonial cacao. And just a tiny pinch of milk, and that's it. I sometimes just feel like I need to have a little bit of the essence of cacao and keeping the connection alive and working with the medicine. It's like the shamans use their tobacco and have tobacco every day.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel like that's beautiful.
So it sounds like you have to figure out what it means for you and what you're looking to get out of the experience.
It comes in phases as well, because sometimes we might go through a phase of transformation, of the big shift, a big change in our lives, and then maybe we need more cacao, and that's completely fine. And it's like a soft medicine that is carrying us through that transition of our lives. Yeah. So sometimes maybe there's a phase of more cacao, and then there's a phase of less cacao, and that's also fine. Yeah.
My teacher, Keith, would say, there's no right way, there's no wrong way, there is
Yeah.
just your way. Because so many times we're questioning ourselves, oh, should I do it now? Is this intentional enough? Am I spiritual enough? It's like, trust in your yes, trust in your being, and like learn from, because maybe it is, quote, wrong, but this is the only way that we learn.
For people that are listening that probably have no idea what we're talking about, what is the main difference between regular cacao that you can buy at the store and then the ceremonial cacao, which we've been talking about, which is the plant medicine?
Ceremonial cacao and the cacao as cacao powder or cacao in a normal chocolate that we can buy in the supermarket. It's usually highly processed, contains lots of sugar. It's just another way of preparing it or processing it, because the ceremonial grade is 100% cacao in like the purest form possible, and slow processed and in a higher quality through that. So I would say that is the biggest or the main difference. Also, the cacao butter is still included in the ceremonial cacao paste.
Yeah. I think the best way to understand it is just to know what the process is. And I feel like so incredibly fortunate to have seen a lot of this process through the cacao that I work with, like visiting the farms and seeing the process from tree to cacao brick. So, for those of you who don't know, cacao is a tree. It's an understory tree. It likes to grow under bananas and mangoes. So, it's not something that likes to be monocropped and out in the complete sun. It It doesn't do very well, and the qualities are very different. You can taste a lot of the energetics and the quality when you're talking about that versus in the wild, if you will, where it's like very diverse culture. So cacao, when it's grown in a farm that's, various things around it, it's more in its natural habitat. And when you get a cacao pod, it's a funky looking, beautiful thing. It looks like an elongated football that just juts out of it. And it's various colors, and there's no specific color. Like you find the ones in Guatemala, they're yellow and kind of purpley. And the ones in the Philippines, they're very red. They're very dark. There varies in color. And it's really beautiful because it's not telling you whether it's ripe or not. They're just colorful. And so you take these pods, you take a machete and you open it up, and there's these beautiful beans inside, and it's covered by this really delicious white pulp that is very fun to eat. And kids usually suck that and then spit the beans out. But the beans are the cacao. And so generally, if you're working with not a big company, not a big farm, but like a really small farm, they'll take that, they'll put it on banana leaves so that it can dry. It naturally ferments. And so I also want to bust that myth of raw cacao. That doesn't exist unless you're in Central America, because once it goes through a fermentation process, it basically is no longer a raw food, and it's, in the technical definition. So then that cacao, once it's dried, it depends on who's working with it, but I can speak for Keats Cacao. There's these women who hand roast all of them, which is a great process, because when you're working with larger companies, everything is machined. They're not looking at, is this bean moldy? Is there bugs in this? They're picking out all of those, they're feeding it to the chickens, they're lightly roasting it. There's a little husk outside of the bean, and those beans are when it's lightly roasted, you have to hand peel it. A lot of companies will over toast it so that way they can basically break it into a nib, and then they blow the shells out. And then they put it through this process that grinds it. And we do the same thing to make it into a paste, unless you want the beans. And then that paste is what we use to make cacao. And that's the end of the process. However, when you're working with cacao powders or chocolate itself, it goes through an intense process. It goes through a hydraulic press. It uses tons and tons of pressure to push the cacao butter out. What's left is cake, and that is the powder. So it takes the butters out. And they do this for a lot of different reasons. A big reason is because that cacao butter is shelf stable, and actually they can sell it for more money, because you can use it as a face product. It literally doesn't go bad.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people do that. And then the cacao cacao cake is what's left over. And people like that because it emulsifies better, because there's no butters in it. But the thing is, a lot of the nutrients that are found in cacao are actually lost in this process. Not all of it, though. There's some that are still intact. You can't get rid of everything 100%.
Right.
A lot of it is lost in that process, especially since hydraulic presses uses a lot of pressure, therefore uses a lot of heat. It's a very delicate process to keep the integrity of the product still alive, is the least amount of heat, because heat can really kill off any of the nutrients or the goodies,
Yeah.
if you will, in cacao. And then, of course, there's that process of conching, and then there's a process of adding all these different things to make it shelf stable and creamy and milky and all the things that we love about chocolate, including myself.
Yeah. Wow, you explained that so beautifully. Like I could
Yes.
totally imagine. I was in that room seeing it all happen, and it also made me just want to have a cup of cacao right now. Like, oh, I want to have some right now. Because it's what you said, the integrity is, I think, the best description of ceremonial versus what you get at the stores. That with the ceremonial grade, you have the integrity of, I guess, the closest to its natural essence. And I think that's another reason why when you are drinking, in addition to creating the ritual and the intention and everything that goes along with it, there's a deeper connection that you can have with the cacao and the plant medicine as well, versus why wouldn't the chocolate bar give me the same experience? And I think that's the difference that is helpful for people to understand, especially if they've never been to a cacao ceremony or even just tried ceremonial cacao.
And it's also important to note, too, that it goes deeper. And
Yeah.
there's actually a huge variety of different kinds of cacao. And so there's what most people, especially the varieties in South America, you find Forastera, which is a hybrid. It's a hybridized pod. And the reason why that really came out is because when the larger companies like Cadbury and all these chocolate factories back in the day, when cacao became popular, they were wanting to produce, but they couldn't keep up with the demand. So they decided to hybridize these trees because trees, especially fruit bearing trees, they take a long time to grow. And so they wanted to make it produce more or bigger or something. And it actually ended up making a few different strains in that process. And so a lot of the beans that you find nowadays are this hybrid. And a big reason why is because the pods are bigger. They yield about 50 to 60 beans, whereas the original, the heirloom, the criollo, they call it, had maybe 20 to 30 beans, which really isn't much. And they were also a lot harder to like peel and get into. And it's a lot more work for a lot less product. And
Right.
so it becomes really interesting because, yes, you can find 100% pure cacao, but is it ceremonial grade? And what does that even mean? And for me, what it means is really high in theobromine and very low in caffeine. If the caffeine is high, it's going to be hard to meditate. It's going to be hard to sit still and to receive the guidance. Or if I'm trying to get body work done, I don't want to be like, I call it like buzzy or no focus.
Yeah, totally. And I love that you mentioned the theobromine because I would love to go into that. What is it that allows us to connect on that deeper level? Or what are some of the benefits of cacao? What are some of these nutrients? Because to be honest, when I think of cacao or just chocolate in general, like I'm not really thinking nutrients. I'm thinking caffeine, sugar, taste delicious. And now the fact that I've connected a lot more with cacao and I've drank it, I know what's in it, but I'd love to hear from you, Nele. What's inside of it? What are we
What's
talking here?
inside? Well, the theobromine, in my experience, allows the body to release. So it widens the blood vessels, so more blood and more oxygen is flowing through our whole system. Like the skin can breathe easier, we have more oxygen in the brain, and of course, there's also more blood flowing into the heart. And that's also one reason why then we can also feel our bodies and our heart even more. So that's one very important thing about it, and I always feel it. And if you have cacao and then you move differently than without the cacao. So the place where we both got to know cacao in Lago Atitlan in Guatemala is a place where they have lots of dances and cacao, and that makes so much sense because you expand, your body is breathing more and you're literally expanding in this kind of way. And also the magnesium, I think, helps with the relaxing and letting go of tension, and these two are my favorites to mention.
I love that. Yeah, 100%. Cacao and dance is so magical. I actually started that back in my community, and it's been such a blessing. But yeah, I love what you spoke about with the theobromine. And I just want to add one thing because I love connecting the dots here. So a lot of people, when they talk about cacao, they say heart medicine. And something that I just want to point out is it literally opens our heart, like what Nele was saying. It dilates the blood vessels that go into the heart and it increases hemoglobin production. So I think that's such a beautiful thing. It's not just a poetic thing, it is a literal thing. Our hearts are just open. And I always think of my dear friend Carrie, who's always like, oh, when I drink cacao, it's like I love everyone. And it's
Oh, yeah.
that feeling.
I also feel like after I drink it, there's this immense level of gratitude that I can't contain. It's like exuding out of me. And then there are other times where I'm so sensitive and emotional that I have to catch myself where I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be drinking cacao before I go into this thing because I might just start crying. But I would say it's also, at least my experience, I've had to be a little bit more mindful about when do I take it? What am I actually doing after my drinking? Am I going to have a hectic day or is it going to be a little bit more chill? But I would echo the love and the gratitude that truly comes after drinking it.
It's that love. I did also want to point out there's magnesium, there's iron, and also the monoamine oxidizers, which basically works with their serotonin levels. And so I always have these reasons why not to drink cacao. So if anyone's on a very high SSRI antidepressant, you want to be really mindful of how much you're intaking because of the MAOIs that are present in cacao. And so if you're taking whatever the standard dose is, I think at 20 to 25 milligrams, you can actually drink the whole thing and you're fine. But like the higher you go, the more mindful you want to be of that. And I always say, listen to your body. Take a sip, slow down. I never add sugar to my cacao in ceremonies because if there's sugar, people are like, this is good. But if we can slow down and enjoy the cacao and the slight bitterness of the cacao, we can take that sip and just listen and be like, okay, all right, I can drink more. It's okay. Or not. And this is how we develop trust within our body. People are sometimes come up to me, they're like, oh, can I do 25% today? Can you just give me half today? And I'm like, I'm going to give you the whole thing and you're going to listen to your body because I'm outside of you. I know nothing of what's going on inside. And if you're done with your cup, that's okay. Let's offer it to the earth. She loves cacao. So going back to MAOIs, that's something to be really mindful of. And because of this heart expansion from the theobromine, which by the way means food of the gods. And I just love that so much. When I first started working with cacao, I was all over the place. I was like, how can I slow down? And it really supported me. For a while, called it like my ADHD medicine because of the PAAs. And I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, but it's phenylethylamine, I think. And it's really good for focus. This is why intention is really important because when you have that intention, it helps to remove the blocks to allow us to come to completion with something. A lot of, for example, bodybuilders, believe it or not, when you're looking at their products, like the protein drinks that they drink, a lot of it's chocolate flavored because there's actually some cacao in there because of the phenylethylamine, which helps them to set their goals, their intentions, and actually achieve them. So it kind of lets all of the thoughts that are saying, you can't do it, or I'm tired, or let's just stop. And it helps to calm that down. And probably the magnesium helps as well, too, so that they can really reach their goal.
I'm so glad that you mentioned one of the contraindications because I think that's so important for people to understand, especially people that have never had cacao and they're like, I'm going to go buy some right now. I'm going to start my ritual. Like, please listen to your body, but also make sure that you're reading about the contraindications online, whether or not you can take it. I mean, it definitely is helpful, but the fact that it is literally heart opening, I think people that have heart conditions might need to be more mindful. I love that you brought up people that are on antidepressants, and I'm sure there are others, but I think that's really important for people that might want to start taking this on as a practice or even attending a cacao ceremony for the first time as well. So I don't know if there are any other contraindications that we can just quickly touch upon so that we can really make people empowered and aware of what it means.
I would say if you've had any heart issues or any heart indication surgeries, for sure be very mindful and start very light, maybe just with a sip or maybe with a light dose. If you're pregnant, please also be mindful, and also antidepressants and high blood pressure, because like we increase the heart rate and we don't want to activate too much for the body. And also for a pregnant woman, like the heart is already pumping a lot and there's another heart inside, and of course it also affects a little bit the baby. So always listen to your body, I would also say that, and be mindful. And sometimes that's hard for people. It takes a while for people to actually listen. It's a process.
And I just want to add one thing, which is the fact that cacao is a potentiator. So it magnifies all other medicines. And whether that's coffee, especially for somebody who's a habitual coffee drinker, it will magnify that. So if you're used to having one cup and that's it, and then you have cacao, you might notice that the caffeine is being picked up. And that's the same with other medicines like tobacco, mushrooms, a lot of different other medicines. And I will also say it can be lethal with MDMA. So it's really good to just be really mindful of what you've taken and yeah, just be responsible.
Yeah, I think that's important. I've talked a lot about cacao, but I also want to hear a little bit about your stories. And Nele, I know you've said that cacao comes to you or it finds you. And I resonate a lot with that because I believe that in so many aspects of my life where when the time is right, I feel that doors open or opportunities present themselves or things pop up on you while you're Googling things online that you may not otherwise have even intended
Mhm.
for them to, but they do, like mentors or spiritual practices. And I think in a way, the seed for cacao for me was planted when I met both of you, like 6 months apart, which is so interesting. And then I started practicing it and got curious about it. And maybe that was how it found me. But I'm curious to hear about how it found you. And especially since it sounds like you both found it in the same place, which is cool. And it would be interesting if you were both in Guatemala at the same time and didn't even know about each other.
When were you there, Rudy?
April 2017.
I was there 2017 in October to 2018 January. Wow, the
Wow.
same year.
And that was the year of the eclipse, one of the major eclipses. I think it was definitely a full eclipse in Oregon. That was a big shift for a lot of people. In my spiritual community, we talk about that. And we're like, yeah, a
Oh,
lot of us had a big shift in that year.
Oh, wow. I figured something was going on in the sky. It always does. Yeah.
wow. So I came to Guatemala in October 2017 and I was volunteering at the yoga forest for 4 months, and I was teaching yoga there and helping out in the kitchen. And one of the tasks of being a volunteer in the space was hosting the Sunday Cacao and Ecstatic Dance. And we were like 5 volunteers. So everyone was involved in the whole process of setting up the space and preparing the cacao and then saying hi to the people that came to the event. And then, of course, at some point, I was also holding the ceremony in the beginning, but like 4 months that I stayed at the same space, I didn't even realize during that time what I was into. I just realized when I came back and brought lots of cacao that I was like, no one here understands what I've experienced and what I did and what the cacao does. And I remember when I came back, it was after 1 full year of traveling then in the end. I came back and there was only one other lady in my town doing cacao ceremonies, and it was really a new thing.
Mm.
And I was 22 and I was like, okay, who am I to do these cacao ceremonies at my age? Like, who will come to something that they don't even know exists? Or, yeah, it was completely new. So it took a lot of courage for me to go out there and just do it. But I remember one day I was sitting in the kitchen of my mom and the cacao was standing in the kitchen, lying there and kind of watching me, and like it felt like a pull, like, okay, when are you going to use me? Or do you want to, because it was like 6 7 blocks and I never drank that much on my own. So there was this request of the cacao, okay, do you want to share me now? Like, yeah. So one day I looked up spaces in my area and then I called, or I went to the location, I don't remember, but the lady there was actually looking for someone who wanted to do full moon cacao ceremonies, and I was hoping that I could offer full moon cacao ceremonies. So that was like, wow, is this really happening? And it just felt like, okay, maybe I'm at the right place and the right time. And also, just before I left Guatemala, I was meeting like an old shaman lady, and she were reading cards for me, and she said, you will share what you learned here and spread the light that you have here where you live in your home. And I was not really satisfied with that answer because I actually wanted to keep on traveling. Then in the end I did what the lady said. So that was really the beginning. So I started with new moon, full moon cacao ceremonies, and they grew bigger and bigger. And at some point I combined it with yoga. I really experimented with the kind of ways that I would do cacao with women or with dance or with just meditating or singing. And I would say cacao and singing is the way I most do it these days. So I was doing cacao ceremonies for 5 years-ish, and I just started out with hosting retreats, and I was doing my second retreat. And in the cacao ceremony, I sat there and I really just felt like cacao was saying to me, maybe you don't need to sit in this position anymore. Maybe you can pass it on to someone. And that was the message that I got. And then I was talking to another lady, and she said she had an online cacao ceremony training. And I was like, oh, wow, that exists, something like this. And then that was that little seed
Yeah.
planted. And then half a year later, I moved into the van with my boyfriend. And like all the work that I previously did, like teaching yoga and doing these singing circles and doing cacao ceremonies, I've never done it online. So it was like a huge step for me to just move in the van, and I had no job, obviously. I didn't know how to make money online. And then we met one of his friends in Barcelona, and he is a marketing business guy, and he just came from Peru and South America, 2 years travel, discovered cacao, and we talked about cacao, and then we went off, and then he called one day and said, hey, Nele, can you imagine doing an online training platform with me, and you do the videos and I do the website? So this is how it basically came to life. And the exact day when he called me, I was in such a deep state of, I didn't know why I was here on this planet Earth. I was so lost, and I really had dark thoughts and didn't see any sense of living. And then he called me and asked me if I didn't want to just try it out and do the videos and see how it goes. And yes, so it literally was the answer of cacao. I don't know, but it was just a synchronicity in some way, and fate, I don't know.
No, I love that it goes back to where the question started, which is the fact that doors open when the time is right. The opportunities are there as long as we're willing to take them. And sometimes taking them seems scary or uncertain. So it's funny that your friend had said to you, do you want to give it a try and see how it goes? And how it goes is like where you are today, which is you have a wonderful online certification program for cacao facilitating and leading cacao ceremony. And I think that's so beautiful that now other people are able to also bring their knowledge and all of their arts. As you talked about, you started to combine your yoga with dance, singing, and cacao, and now bringing that to community and what they're doing with others. So I love that story.
Thank
And
you for giving me the space to share.
yeah, definitely. And Rudy, I think community for me is the word that resonates for you because your business is called Community Cacao. So, how did you start with cacao and building your community?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I just wanted to acknowledge Sheila's story because that was really beautiful, and just so many things are just like, yes. I really love the synchronicities and just the fact that, like, really truly feeling the depths of how deep we can feel the shadow work and the hitting rock bottom, which really, for me, I feel like is an access door to a breakthrough. So it's like feeling those moments, pausing and being still enough to be able to receive. And I've had so many moments like that of just freaking out and then getting really sick and then having to not do anything. And that is when the downloads, the gifts come. So, very beautiful story. So my story started in 2016. It was my first year living in a new city in Newport, Rhode Island, and I met a local. I met a lot of locals, but this one particular local had this incredible session with cacao and massage, and it blew his mind. So he bought 1 pound and he cut it all up and put it in these little baggies and was giving it out to everyone. And it just so happened that he gave me one. Now, he put in a ceremonial dose, and if you're not familiar with what that is, it's usually around 1.5 ounces, which, if you look at it, it looks like a lot. So I took it home. I took 1 spoonful, put it in hot water, and was like, tastes like chocolate. You're weird. And was just, okay, whatever. And so this was the beginning of winter. And that same winter, I believe it was January, My family is from the Philippines. My mom wanted to go visit. So we all go to the Philippines. We go visit family. It had almost been 10 years, so a decade since we had been back to the Philippines. And we spent a whole month there. And on the very last day, as we are waiting for the bus to go back to the city to fly back home, our family is around us. They're waiting with us because my mom wants the bus with AC, and they're all full. We're just sitting there. We're waiting and we're waiting. Our family, they're giving us gifts like, oh, take this. And like, here's like a snack for the road. And all these things. And my grandmother in particular comes up to me with these beans and she puts them in my hand. She's like, this is for you. And I look at them. I've literally never seen them before. And I did not know what to do with them. I was like, do I plant these? What do I do? She was like, you eat it. It's tablia, we call it, or cacao. And I was like, where did you get this? And so she was like, well, your grandfather loved cacao and planted over 25 trees in our land. You've been sleeping underneath them this whole time. And so that's cacao. So I ended up being like, okay, I know we've been waiting for a long time, but I have to see this tree. And so I leave the bus stop and I'm like, if it comes by, it's fine. I need to see this tree. So that was the first time I saw a cacao tree. It was one that my grandfather had planted on our land in the Philippines. And at that same time, when I was coming back home, that person who first introduced me to cacao, he had just gotten back from like a Titlan. And so he had just sat with this chocolate shaman and he's all, wow, chocolate. And like, same thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, you will not believe this. And so we're just buzzing off just the word cacao. And so he's like, well, we got to go to a cacao ceremony. And so I was like, I don't know what that means, but okay, let's go. And so I go to my first cacao ceremony. It's 3 hours long. It was really expensive, I thought at the time. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I can't believe I'm doing this. And at this point, mind you, did not do yoga, did not meditate, did not know what spirituality even was. And I sat in this 3 hour long thing. And I remember as it was coming to an end, the practitioner was like, all right, do you guys want to share any reflections? And so I'm just like, I don't know what that means. Other people start talking. And so I remember this one woman was next to me and she was like, I saw colors and auras and blah. And I was just like, did we drink the same thing? Because I did not experience any of that. If anything, I was very awkward. I was very uncomfortable. I was sitting on the ground, always changing and shifting. And so I remember that specific moment because it really forced me to go inside. And the moment I went inside, I felt so incredibly inadequate. And then I started crying. And this feeling, this thought, this urge came up from deep within me. And it said one thing. It said, you're not happy, quit your job. And then it was gone. And I cried. I cried so much. I didn't even say anything after that. I just left. I'm out of here. And I went home and I just remember being very quiet, very silent. And it took me about a week, but I ended up quitting the job that I was working. I was managing a cafe at that time by myself. And at that point, I was front of the house, back of the house manager. So I felt like it was really easy to quit because I was like, this is too much work for one person. So I quit that and I was like, I'm going to go look for another job. But I was looking for the same exact thing because I wanted the same exact responsibility and money and all these things. But the universe really had different plans because the partner that I was seeing at the time, I was living with him and his dad. So that was my housing and all that, and that fell apart. And so all of a sudden, I'm jobless, no partner, no house to live in, and I'm just untethered. And I remember my first initial reaction was, oh, thank God. But then reality set in, and I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And so I remember actually making myself a cup of cacao and just being like, okay, heart, I'm listening. What do you want to do? And it only said one thing, travel. And I was like, cool. That sounds like a great idea because it was March, I believe, at the time, and I was cold. New England is cold. And it's a place where you go outside and your face hurts. And I don't understand why I was living there. So I was like, I'm going to Florida. And I remember I was like, I'm going to have my last get together with a guy that introduced me to cacao. His name's Rick. And I was just like, we're going to have our last breakfast together and I'm never going to see you again. So bye. And, had this moment. And he was like, all right, so you're going to leave. That's good. You want to be warm. Okay, you're going to go to Florida. I mean, if you're going to go down south, why don't you go down a little further south and go to Guatemala? And I was just like, and at this point, it just so happened that I had gotten my passport because I went to the Philippines. But the thing was, I'd never traveled alone anywhere by myself. And for some reason, it felt good and right. So I bought a one-way ticket and left. I put all my stuff in storage and was like, all right, we're going to Guatemala.
Wow.
Yeah. And I spent about a little over 3 months there. The first week was very depressing. I spent a lot of time crying and on my phone. And my friend Rick was just like, hey, get off your phone, go talk to people. I was like, I don't want. And he was just like, go talk to people, go see the chocolate shaman, get off your phone. I was like, oh, fine. And so I ended up visiting this chocolate shaman in Guatemala. And I remember arriving there early because in my definition of being on time is early. And if you're on time, you're late. So I was there early, but everyone in San Marcos is on San Marcos time, which is very late.
Oh, yeah.
I arrived there and Keith is like, hey, you're here really early. Go take a hike, go down to the water or something. We'll be ready in 15 minutes. And I'm like, but it's like almost 1. He's like, trust me, no one's going to be here until later. So I come back later. I'm still like one of the first people on the porch. And I remember because at this time I'd never done any jury work or anything like that. I remember sitting on his porch and I literally did not understand a word he was saying. He was talking about all kinds of things that were way above my knowledge. But for some reason, something was telling me to stay. Something was telling me to come back. And so I did. And at this time, Keith was doing 3 ceremonies a week that were about 1:30 fairy time until about 6 to 7 p.m. And he would not stop until the processing was done. And I was there every single time for that entire, I guess, 3 months. And it's interesting because I still think about it now. And I did a lot of journaling during that time. And I remembered I didn't understand what he was saying. So I would record it and I'd listen to it and I'd type it and I'd write it. And I'd just be like, what is he talking about? But there was something there that really deeply resonated. And there was something about cacao. There was something about whatever it was that he was talking about. He was telling me that I was powerful and that I was a wizard. And I was just like, I don't know what you're talking about, but okay. I'm just going to roll with it. And when I left there, I'd gone back home to Rhode Island, not from that same town, but I went back home and I was like, I'm going to work a summer, keep traveling. And I get there and I realize what energy is because I get to the town and I can feel everyone so much. And I'm just like, I can't stay here. I have to go. And so I ended up selling all my stuff and I bought a one-way train ticket to the West Coast. And that started my 2 years of backpacking to really get to know who I was. And I had bought a bunch of cacao because at that time you couldn't order it online. You had to go down to Guatemala, backpack it up. So I had 50 pounds of cacao and I was like, I'm going to bring this 50 pounds of cacao, some clothes, and just see what happens. And that was how I met so many different connections in my life. And wherever I went, I always shared cacao. And I shared cacao so much to the point where I ran out of cacao and I couldn't afford it and was like, oh, I think I need to rethink my strategy here and maybe start holding ceremonies where there is an energy exchange. And this is really where Community Cacao started planting its roots. And the universe brought me back to Rhode Island and eventually to Newport. And that's where the roots started to grow and deepen in the soil. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I grew up not really feeling like I belonged because I grew up on a 7 by 3 mile island where at that time, especially when we first arrived, my family was the only minority. And so we were literally just in a place where we were the only ones and no one really understood us because we didn't speak English. And it was just so many differences. So I learned how to be a chameleon and I morphed a lot. And in that process, I forgot and lost who I was. And so the intention of Community Cacao was returning back to self, returning back to my authentic self and not trying to morph into the different groups that were around me, which was what I was an expert at doing. And so Community Cacao was really just me waving that freak flag, being like, hey, y'all, anyone else? Anyone else? And it attracted so many people, and it continues to grow, and I love it. And it's really all about community and authentic relating and just supporting each other.
Wow. I kept thinking courage in that story, like the courage to sell everything, to go backpacking, to go alone. And I think it's just so powerful, that story, and very beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And I love both of your stories and the fact that in your own ways, it was about authentically finding yourselves, authentically trusting yourselves, and taking risks that years ago, or like even like a year before your experience, you may not otherwise have taken, and challenging also the perception of what the world expects from us or what others are expecting from us. So that's what I pulled out of both of your stories. And I think that in and of itself, that's such a powerful message, that cacao was almost a facilitator. It was the spark that did it, that started it. And then a testament to both of you to listen, because I think that's another thing, is oftentimes we can get these messages from the universe or things fall on our lap and we just push away, we avoid, we're not doing it. And then we end up either going backwards or staying in a stuck in a certain place. And so a testament to both of you to listening and moving forward.
I feel
Yeah.
like it's all about trying to listen to the whispers before they come screams. But
Mhm.
I feel like I'm an expert at the screams now.
Why we need cacao, because when we have cacao in that moment with ourselves, we actually make space for the whispers to be heard.
Mhm. Yeah. So we've talked about using cacao as an individual practice, something you can do at home. We've also heard your stories where cacao also brings us together in circle, in community. And as final words, I'd love to hear from you. How can people who want to try it do that for themselves? What might that look like?
I would say experiment with it. I think you will find your way, and also it depends on the day. Like, how do I feel in my body? What does my body need? And then maybe you can adapt to that. Maybe it's just sitting with cacao. Maybe it's just lighting a candle, setting an intention for the day, or going into ceremony with a process, with something that you're moving through or something that you want to release. Maybe it's opening your heart and journaling or talking to someone and opening up. Maybe it's taking a walk barefoot somewhere. Maybe it's singing, moving. I feel like there are so many ways to experiment. Maybe it's drawing. I love to draw with cacao. It's just opening up differently.
I would say it goes back to there's no right way, there's no wrong way. Some people are just going to jump in and drink that cup and have their experience. And some people are going to court the medicine. They're going to have the cacao for a year and they're going to have it sit there staring at them for a while.
Mm. Yeah.
Like I hear so many different stories, and whatever it is divine, and it's going to come up or it won't. It's all about trusting our own process and how that relationship unfolds. It's going to be unique to everybody. I really do believe that cacao is the food for the shift. And that's exactly the medicine that we need right now, is just to open hearts and be more embodied and feel more joy, access our magic.
Mm-hmm. For
May
sure.
there be the cacao cup overflowing.
Yes, I can share that. Like one of my friends, she says that cacao is bitter in the mouth, but it becomes sweet in the heart. And
Mm,
maybe that's like a beautiful way also to take it.
I love that. Well, I want to thank you both so much for being here today. And I'm going to share your links so that those who are interested can learn more about where to find you, where to participate in a community event, where to learn how to be a facilitator. There are so many resources out there. So I hope if it's sparked something within you that you give it a try. And thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so
Thank you
much
for
for
having me.
sharing. It was really, really beautiful.
Thank you for listening. If you're interested in becoming a client and working with me, visit me at nunatherapy.com or follow me on social media at Nuna Therapy for regular content and inspiration. Until next time.